Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Macquarie University's Master of Cybersecurity Analysis webinar. We have a really interesting presentation today. I hope you'll find it informative and engaging. I'm sure you will. It'll be given by Dr. Stephen McCombie. Dr. McCombie is a senior lecturer in the Department of Security Studies and Criminology at Macquarie University. He'll tell you a bit about himself. And while we're waiting, because there'll be a few people who will still be joining us, I thought we would have a couple poll questions. These questions will be helpful for Dr. McCombie to get an understanding of who exactly is visiting today. So our first poll question, what is your undergraduate degree? Perhaps you have an undergraduate degree in cybersecurity. You may still be studying, you may have finished studying. Perhaps you have an undergraduate degree in computing or IT, maybe business, maybe humanities law, maybe something else. Maybe you don't have an undergraduate degree. If you don't have an undergraduate degree, you're still very welcome to join us. We take students without undergraduate degrees in special circumstances. I'll just give everybody an opportunity to answer that. So I'm going to end the poll now. I'm going to share the results. So what is your undergraduate degree? Your undergraduate degree, 40% of you have an undergraduate degree in cybersecurity or cyber/security areas. 10% of you have an undergraduate degree in business, economics, finance or accounting. 10% of you have an undergraduate degree in humanities and law. 5% of you have an undergraduate degree in computing or IT, but not in the cybersecurity area. 35% of you have another degree. And everybody here visiting today has an undergraduate degree or is currently studying one. So I'm just going to ask another question now. So please indicate your current employment or study situation. Are you working in cybersecurity? Are you working in law enforcement, military or intelligence? Are you working in IT, but maybe not cybersecurity? Are you working in a business role? Maybe you're in another job in full-time employment. Maybe you're currently studying full-time. Maybe you're not studying or not working full-time. I'll just give people a few seconds to answer that question. So end the poll in about 5 seconds. I'm going to share those results with you. So we can see more than a third of you, 38%, are studying full-time. 8% of you working in cybersecurity at the moment, 12% in other IT roles, 8% in a business role, 19% of you are in other full-time employment, and 15% of you are neither studying nor working full-time at this current moment. But the biggest one, 38% of you are currently studying full-time. So now that everybody has had an opportunity to come and join us, I'm going to hand over very shortly to Dr. Stephen McCombie. For those of you who've just joined us, Dr. Stephen McCombie is a senior lecturer in the Department of Security Studies and Criminology at Macquarie University. He's going to talk to you about Master of Cybersecurity Analysis. We're glad that you've been able to join us. You're very welcome. I'm going to hand over to Stephen McCombie now.
Thanks, Andrew, and good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, as Andrew said, I'll be talking a bit about our Masters in Cybersecurity Analysis. And I thought to help illustrate it, I'd take you through some material we actually teach and in regard to things sort of happening in the current environment that might help you understand the types of skills and the types of gaps we're trying to fill. Now, it was really interesting with the survey that people were able to fill out. There's quite obviously a diversity of people in terms of your disciplinary background, from various degrees, but also your professional experience. And one of the things about cybersecurity today is the fact that it's not just a technical thing anymore, and it's really, as I'll talk about, there's many roles in cybersecurity today that need various skills, but probably the most important thing is that the ability to be multidisciplinary, be able to understand different challenges, whether they be technical things, whether it be relating to geopolitics, criminology. So it's really the ability to bring various skills together that the biggest challenges in cybersecurity are about. But before I talk about that, I'll just tell you a bit about my background. I've actually worked in the cybersecurity field for 25 years. Sounds like a long time, I know. Back when I first started, I actually was working in the New South Wales Police as a detective, and we helped set up what we called the computer crime investigation unit, which became the cybercrime unit, all those years ago. And obviously, a lot of the work we did then was more around people committing frauds using computer systems in organisations. But gradually, the internet became very important. I moved on from law enforcement and actually worked for IBM in the early 2000s, and that was really interesting because it's obviously a massive IT organisation, one of the biggest corporations in the world. Helped set up a computer emergency response team responding to IT incidents in those early days, and that really led me to be a bit more interested in understanding the reasons behind cybercrime and cyber attacks. And I actually ended up coming back to Macquarie University and doing my PhD in computer science. And basically that work examined attacks on Australian banks in the early 2000s by Russian and Ukrainian groups. And it, again, as I was talking about, it's this multidisciplinary approach where I was looking at the technical aspects, I was looking at the geopolitical aspects, I was looking at the traditional crime that came out of Eastern Europe, understanding money laundering, the type of malware being used. So again, it illustrates this point of the diversity of cybersecurity in terms of skills that are required. And that's really my interest, is understanding the geopolitical dimension behind cybersecurity and better understanding cyber adversaries. Because my view is that if you don't understand your adversary in cyberspace, you cannot defend yourself. Nothing you do is going to be appropriate unless you have an understanding of the threat and what's driving your threat actor. So in terms of cybersecurity as a profession, as a career, it's a fantastic opportunity. There's a massive shortage of skilled people. AusCyber, which is an Australian government organisation which is involved in developing the Australian cybersecurity industry, identified last year that there's by 2026 there'll be 17,000 more cybersecurity workers needed. And even given the education providers running courses like ours, there's still going to be a massive shortfall in terms of those skills. And so it's really a great area to go into if you're looking for opportunities. But it's important to understand there's many different roles within cybersecurity, not just technical roles. The US government is obviously very aware of this cybersecurity shortfall, and through their National Institute of Standards and Technology, they actually created a thing called NICE, which looks at the various categories of roles that are needed in cybersecurity. And you can see from this table that I'm showing that there are things like security provision, operate and maintain, these traditional technical tasks that need to be done that cybersecurity, we did in cybersecurity 20 years ago. But as you see down the bottom, there's a lot of newer roles, more interdisciplinary roles that are required. Things, protect and defend in terms of having a better understanding of attacks and being able to develop strategies around defending, analyze attacks, collect and operate. Actually, what we call denial and deception. When you have a cyber adversary, you actually have to do effectively counterintelligence against them. You need to be able to make their job harder. You need to gather information about what they're trying to do, just like an counterintelligence agency does against spies. It's no different. Then finally, investigate. So there's lots of roles in these 4 areas in this diagram. And I'd suggest something like our master's degree is really focused on these 4 areas, rather than perhaps the more technical 3 areas at the top. So with that, maybe Andrew, if you have any questions, oh, sorry, I'll keep going, sorry. So basically, our focus of the analysis course is really around combining skills in traditional intelligence with the cyber domain, both from a perspective of the use of those cyber skills for intelligence collection and other intelligence activities, but also conversely using intelligence methodologies in cyber. I talked about the importance of understanding your enemy. So in terms of our course that we run within the department, we have undergraduate units, master's degrees, and research degrees. But obviously, we're talking today about the Master of Cybersecurity Analysis, which is one of our master's courses, which really are 1 or 1.5 years, depending on your previous education. So I'm essentially talking about the Master of Cybersecurity Analysis today, but I just want to make mention of the Masters of Intelligence, because obviously, as I say, it's very important, the issues that come up in terms of intelligence that also come up in terms of cybersecurity. And there is this 2-way playing in terms of using those intelligence skills in cybersecurity and using those cybersecurity skills in intelligence. So just in terms of the Master's Cybersecurity Analysis, we have one common unit with the other master's degrees run by the department. That's in critical thinking and research design. It's really important to sort of set your thinking in terms of understanding how to do proper research, how to gather data, how to present it in an academic way. Then we talk about cybercrime and cyber policing, which is a unit I actually run myself, which is essentially around criminal activity on the internet, whether it be fraud, like cyber fraud, like I talked about with the Australian banks, or it could be child pornography, could be grooming children on the internet, could be harassment of people over the internet, a range of criminal activities. Then we have a course called Applied Cybersecurity, which is essentially around cyber management, how you actually run, how a CISO operates, how you develop strategy, how the various aspects of cybersecurity are done, and we try and match very closely the ISC2 CISSP education domain in that. Then another unit we call Australian Cyber Intelligence, was about using intelligence techniques in the cyber world and doing open source intelligence. And then we have a simulation cybersecurity, which is done in conjunction with other departments. And then we have cyber conflict, cyber espionage, and cyber terrorism, which is another unit I teach, which is essentially around how states use cyber and how states are attacked in cyber, also how politically motivated groups use cyber. As I mentioned, there is a combined degree, Master of Intelligence, Master of Cybersecurity Analysis, which can be 2 years depending on your background, which we would be recommending as in terms of the most diverse and best education we give in this space. So with that, I might just throw back to Andrew if we've got any questions about the actual program.
Thank you very much, Stephen. I just wanted to ask you, I've mentioned, and you've mentioned about the Department of Security Studies and Criminology. Can you just talk very, very briefly about what is this department? What's the history of it, and how it comes to form education and leadership in this area today?
Yeah, so the department has been around for quite a while. It really came out of some issues around 9/11 and issues around terrorism and more advanced skills in law enforcement and in security studies were needed, and a more practitioner-oriented approach. So basically the department was started, in fact, it was opened by John Howard when he was Prime Minister. And out of that built what we do today. And really as much as we're academics and we publish and we've got academic careers, many of us have a professional background as well. Obviously, as I said, I've been a consultant, I've been a police officer. Other people within our department, have had intelligence careers. Some have worked in government, doing policy for government. There's other law enforcement people. People that have worked in these fields extensively have their professional experience, but also the academic experience. So we're trying to really focus on producing graduates ready for industry. And we try to make as much as we can of our assessments and our work around work product, things you actually do in your job, rather than just, I mean, obviously there is a lot of academic aspects as well, but not focused totally on that.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Just to mention, for those who are visiting us today, we have the opportunity to ask questions of Stephen. You'll see in your Zoom webinar, a Q&A box should be down the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to ask questions while Stephen is presenting. And when Stephen finishes presenting, we'll be leaving plenty of time for Stephen to answer those questions. So yeah, please, I can see there's a couple of questions in there already, but please, if you have any questions at all about the course, about anything that Stephen's talking about, please feel free to use that question and answer box. With that, I'll hand back to Stephen, who's going to take us through a really interesting true story in the area of cybersecurity.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so just continuing on, I want to talk about something referred to as a cyber intelligence gap. And one of the great challenges today is that the intelligence community to date hasn't really had a good handle on cyber. And that's led to a lot of intelligence failures, you might say. And probably the best example of that is what happened in 2016 in the US elections and the interference by Russia. And it's a really interesting story, and it really illustrates well, what we're trying to do with the cybersecurity analysis course. So everybody will remember the US election 2016 for many reasons. It was groundbreaking. First time a female was nominated by a major party. First time someone without any government service or military service was nominated by a major party. First time a spouse of a former president was nominated. There was also the two most unpopular candidates ever to run to the US presidency. Something like 52% a disapproval rate for Clinton and 61% for Trump. But the thing we probably all remember best of all is the fact that the Russians interfered with the election. And it's, in a way, it's surprising that we weren't better prepared for what actually did happen. Now, I don't know if any of you've seen the interview by Oliver Stone with Vladimir Putin, which is actually good to watch. But he, of course, denies that they tried to influence the outcome. And that's, maybe just Putin lying, or there actually I might come back to that at the end. Now, in terms of what the US thought, they thought it was a massive thing. Now, Michael Hayden, who had been the director of the NSA and the CIA, said it was the most successful COVID operation in history. That's pretty amazing. So he's putting it right up there. And it wasn't the first time that the Russians, indeed the Soviet Union, had tried to interfere with US elections. There's a long history of that. The KGB's been involved in these activities for many years. For those that know the history, they may remember a fellow called Barry Goldwater, who ran 1964, who was a hawk, who they particularly didn't want to be president. He ended up being beaten by Johnson. You may not know that. Even Richard Nixon, who was considered a Cold War warrior, was a target of the KGB for disinformation in the election. A fellow called Scoop Jackson, who you probably haven't heard of, is a bit more obscure. He was a Democrat nominee. He was a hawk as well. I believed in a strong defense against the Soviets. Had very close links with dissidents in Russia, and they didn't want him. They actually spread a rumor that he was a homosexual. He was unmarried, and created a fake FBI memorandum. So this type of activity, this disinformation, has a long history. Even Ronald Reagan, he was again considered a Cold War warrior. They didn't want him. And this is how the intelligence community assessed what happened after the event. James Clapper, who was the Director of National Intelligence in 2016, when he gave evidence to the US Congress, said Russia's influence activities in the run-up to the 2016 presidential election constituted the high watermark of their long-running efforts since the 1960s. So it was a big thing. But it's amazing that America was caught so flat-footed, because if you think about that history, going back to the 60s of these types of activities, but even more recently, when John McCain ran against Obama, His campaign was hacked by, they believe, by the Chinese state sponsored, by the People's Liberation from China, and they stole their emails. Even Barack Obama, when he made his first speech on cybersecurity, when he first became president, related the fact that his campaign was also breached in that 2008 election. So there's a long history of these types of attacks against US elections. So you would think that the US would be prepared, but they clearly weren't. And if you look at the three branches of the activity that actually occurred, there was what's probably quite famous, the attack against the DNC and the Clinton campaign. So the emails that the DNC had and then the Clinton campaign had, and that was done by three different agencies from Russia: the military intelligence, the FSB, which is the counterintelligence agency, I suppose, and for border control, and the SVU, which is the foreign intelligence gathering agency. There was also, apart from those email attacks, which actually attacks on the electoral authorities in the states. So authorities that ran elections in the states in America, and vendors of electoral equipment. So a lot of American elections, they actually have machines in the polling booths you use. So actual, like a vending machine, basically, that you pick the person out, and there are attacks on them as well. And lastly, called troll farm activity. So social networking applications to spread disinformation through an organization called the IRA, which was this private organization set up by a Russian citizen. So when you think about Russia, the head of Russia, the president of Russia, is, you could call him the spy in chief in some ways. He has been a KGB agent, and he was one of the first leaders of the FSB, which after the end of the Soviet Union and they got rid of the KGB, it was started as one of the intelligence organizations in the new Russia. And in fact, didn't change that much, were operated at the same building as they had during the days of the Soviet Union. Now, like any government organizations, the intelligence organs of Russia have their roles set down. They have their swim lanes for various activities. You can see in that diagram, certain organizations have primary roles in military intelligence. The GRU, which is military intelligence, have that role. The Foreign Intelligence Service are involved in political intelligence and what they call active measures, which includes everything up to assassinating people. FSB is essentially supposed to be more about counterintelligence, but the reality about the Russia, I should say, is the fact that these intelligence agencies don't sit their swim lanes. They actually compete against each other for Putin's attention. They're also very well connected in terms of how they report in. They report into the Security Council directly. So all these agencies have direct links into the Security Council and informal ties back to Putin because of his former leadership of the FSB and having been a KGB agent. Very interested in these affairs. But it doesn't end there in terms of actual real government organizations, but also informal organizations, whether it be business lobbies, organized crime groups, other violent state actors, all sorts of other methods that Putin uses for active measures. Now, obviously, one of the groups involved in the attack against the email campaign was actually Russian military intelligence. And the FBI have investigated the case and actually identified a large number of them, and they've been indicted by the FBI. But how did they come in? I mean, they're a very capable organization. They've got cryptographers, PhDs galore, very capable people. But how did they actually attack the Democrats? They used phishing, which is a technique which has been around for a long time, since the early 2000s, and it worked fine. And that's the nature of cybercrime and cyber attacks. Is sometimes the simplest techniques are the most effective. And here's an email that came to a staff member. You may get emails like this saying to change your password, and they're fake, but unfortunately people working in the Democratic campaign did not. They were taken to a fake Google site to change their password. Even the head of the campaign, a fellow called John Podesta, who'd been the head of staff of Obama, he was compromised because a staff member decided to change his email. So all his emails were accessed by the Russians. And this was like a factory operation. They compromised so many people. And this information was used through this organisation called DCLX, which was and Gusefa. So they had two IDs they used to spread this information, pretending not to be from Russia. But in fact, there were Russian agents operating to spread this information. So that's one aspect of the attack. Another one was actually this attack, and you can see a voting machine here on the actual electoral authorities and vendors. They tried to get code for these voting machines. There's no evidence they actually did anything, but perhaps they weren't able to, or we just don't know the result of it. They did get into a database in Illinois of registered voters, which they exfiltrated all the records. So basically all the voter records for Illinois. So there was a multi-faceted attack going on. So what was the investigation on the US side, in terms of, were they caught unawares? Now, interestingly enough, the people that actually first identified the attack was actually the Dutch Secret Service, organisation called AIVD. They had actually compromised Russian military intelligence and were watching them when they were actually attacking various sites. And they let the NSA in the US know that this attack was happening in 2015 on the DNC. This is the year before the election. So the NSA got this information, passed it to the FBI, and it just went to a regular agent, not a specialist cyber person, and he actually didn't even look at it for over a month. He tried to contact the DNC. He was put through to the DNC help desk, the IT help desk at the DNC, and it was many months before they did anything. In fact, it wasn't until June the next year that DNC actually fully cooperated with the FBI. The DNC, as a result, actually got a private company to come in and investigate what happened sometime later. So basically, despite all these previous incidents and all these warnings, all this information known, there was very little done. So if we just follow the timeline of what actually occurred, all this leaked information was posted on the 8th of June 2016. 15th of June, more stuff was leaked. Same day, CrowdStrike put out their report. CrowdStrike, as I said, had been brought in by the DNC. They're a private organisation to look at what had happened. WikiLeaks was actually asking for more information from Gusefa, this entity that the Russians were using. It wasn't until the 25th of July that the FBI actually announced that it was doing an investigation. And on the 26th, a highly classified CIA assessment was circulated saying they had high confidence it was Russia. But it wasn't until August that they actually briefed the congressional leaders. And it wasn't until October that the DNI, the Director of National Intelligence, and the Department of Homeland Security both publicly accused Russia. So things were moving very slowly in terms of response. In fact, no formal recommendations made to Obama until after the election, which is amazing in terms of responding. So despite the significance of this and how we're talking now about it being the most successful COVID operation in history, things move very slowly. And it's because of this inability of traditional intelligence services to actually understand the scope of these cyber things. And despite all these agencies knowing, the CIA knowing, the NSA knowing, the FBI, DHS knowing, no one really thought this is a really serious threat to America, and we should be doing something coordinated about it. There was nothing really was done. And it just shows this lack of integration between cyber investigators and intelligence. And it's really what we're about in our masters. Now, another aspect of it was this social media attack, and there's an organization called the Internet Research Agency, which is run by an oligarch. And basically, this oligarch, who's called Putin's chef, he set up this organization, and they spread disinformation about the various candidates and about different things, and they targeted 3 states. And you can see some information about the different platforms. They actually organized actual real life protests, not just online protests, but real life protests that people came to and protested in. And here's a photo of they got two actors to dress up as Hillary and Bill Clinton and put them in a cage at a protest in Miami. They organised protests for miners, all sorts of activities. So when and you might think, well, okay, they got Donald Trump elected, and they actually sent out something when Trump got elected, saying, "Come and show your support for Trump." But ironically, they also sent out messages saying, "He's not our president. That's bullshit. Not my president." You know, sold T-shirts saying he's not the president. So really, when you think about Russia's aim in all this, was actually to discredit all politics in America, to spread distrust, not to naturally get Trump elected. Sure, they were probably happy to get him elected because it caused more havoc. But the nice thing for them is that Trump is because of all this activity, his presidency is weakened. So he's not strong either. So they don't face a strong America. So, and that's how they operate. So what are they what's going on now? You know, in terms of Russia, they're doing much the same stuff. Now, those that, you know, have been seeing some of the COVID disinformation going around, a lot of it's coming out of Russia, you know, out of these various official and non-official agencies that are pushing this sort of stuff. And of course, there's another US election on this year, and Russia's been involved in stoking, you know, racial tension, just like they did in 2016, and they actually supported Sanders over Biden. Now, it's not that they want Sanders, that is my view, or it's more about creating divisions. You know, that's their aim. So I just think it's a really interesting case study in terms of understanding, you know, the complexities of cybersecurity today. You know, like when I started in cybersecurity, I wouldn't have been thinking about US elections, but you know, that's how it's changed, because in every aspect, every real world aspect of life, there's a cyber dimension. So we have to be multidisciplinary. We have to understand these different things to be able to actually deal with these problems. So with that, I'll just go back to talk a little bit about our department. Obviously, we teach other areas. You know, I talked about the importance of, you know, practical education that we have. We have a master's in security and strategic studies, and this really for people that want to be involved in, you know, policy making at a high level in government, understanding, you know, those sort of major geopolitical issues. You can see how that aspects of that come into cyber as well. A master's of intelligence focused around people that want careers in intelligence. Master of criminology, those are more interested in criminology, perhaps in law enforcement, other areas. And then also a master in counterterrorism, you know, terrorism being an important area that we look at as well. And as I mentioned, there's joint degrees, not just the one I mentioned around Masters of Intelligence and Master of Cybersecurity, but many others, you know, that we have different combinations depending on, you know, your professional needs, your future career aspirations, you know, your interests, that type of thing. So with that, I'll probably on time. I'll just throw it over to Q&As and over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Stephen. That's really enlightening. And it's throwing up a few questions. There have been quite a few questions coming through as you've been talking. I'm going to just ask you some of those questions. We'll get through as many as we can in the time available. And those we don't get through, we'll answer afterwards via email. But Sonny has asked, you know, you mentioned vacancies in the cybersecurity workspace. What do the non-technical or strategy-based job opportunities look like? Do these exist purely in government? No. In fact, all organisations of any size have cybersecurity functions that have people that don't do technical roles. Like, you know, somewhere like National Australia Bank, where I worked, they have something like maybe 300 people working in cybersecurity, and more than half would not be in technical roles. Thank you. Continuing on the theme of the job market for cybersecurity, someone has asked, one of my lecturers said there was a good demand in banks seeking for people who could fight against credit card fraud, money laundering, etc. Do you see the trend continuing, and how's the job market for cybersecurity graduates? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and obviously I worked for a National Australia Bank, so I know that banks are massive employers of cybersecurity people, but in a way that the opportunities are much broader. Like, you know, mining companies have massive cybersecurity teams. You know, retailers have, because every organisation is targeted in some way these days, whether they're looking to make money, to steal intellectual property, to spy. So every organisation needs to have a cybersecurity team that have a diversity of skills. So the market is very good. I mean, obviously the government also is employing a lot of people in this space, not just in Australian Signals Directorate, but in the Department of Homeland Security, in all law enforcement agencies, in the other intelligence agencies. Cyber is such a key part of all these. You know, it's a key threat in all these areas. And you know, we think today about, you know, obviously, you know, in the midst of COVID, but think about, you know, how, you know, look what we're doing now. We're using information technology just to have this conversation. You know, so much of our life is dependent on the internet and connectivity. So cyber is just the fabric of our lives now, and that's the thing. It's becoming, you know, organisations before wouldn't have thought about cybersecurity. Now it's a really key threat.
Great, thank you very much. Alexandra has asked, is the Masters of Cybersecurity Analysis more theory-based in comparison to Masters of Information Technology in Cybersecurity, which seems to be more technical-based? Now, we do offer other degrees, other master's degrees in cybersecurity area at Macquarie University outside of the Department of Security Studies and Criminology. They're run by other faculties, by other departments. So how would you answer Alexandra's question about whether is it more theory-based compared to others being more technical-based?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously the Masters of IT, the cybersecurity unit, they're doing a lot of straight technical courses where you're basically learning, you might be learning network security, where you're learning about firewalls, and they'll be looking at using particular applications. And that sort of that nice diagram I showed you, that's sort of more those run and manage type roles that those sort of skills are for. I would suggest our course isn't, I wouldn't call it theoretical, because we're not talking about theory, we're talking about real practice. We're talking about cybersecurity practice. Perhaps our focus is less on straight technology rather than actually the entire threat, but technology plays a really important part, and we need to really fundamentally understand the threats to technology. So there's plenty of technical knowledge that you'll get in our course, but we're not focusing on teaching you a tool, you know, teaching you how to use a tool or how to do a straight technical task, but understand the significance of, you know, the way networks hang together, and the significance of that, how the internet hangs together, how all these different how malware works, what the nature of the threat is, because you need that interplay of understanding, you know, the security problem plus the technology at the same time. And that's, I suppose, what we're trying to do. Whilst I'd suggest MIT are more focused on training people for those operational roles running technology.
Great, thank you. Continuing along this same theme, Emma has asked a question, how does the Master of Information Technology and Cybersecurity differentiate from your degree? I think you've answered that one, but she also has another question. Is the teaching approach in the Master of Cybersecurity Analysis heavily case-based?
Certainly parts of it are, yeah. I mean, I would certainly say our cyber conflict unit, our cyber crime unit is a lot around real cases, and that really follows my thinking, is the fact that you don't need to come up with theoretical approaches when you've got real incidents you can look at. I mean, obviously theory is important in terms of understanding, interpreting a real case, but ours is a very practical application, and it's a very fast moving application. So we need to keep a lot of focus on what's happening right now, you know, looking at threats as they change.
Great, thank you very much. Owen's asked a similar question. Is the Master of Intelligence an avenue to pursue a non-technical entry into cybersecurity, or is a Master of Cybersecurity Analysis more suited for non-technical roles? So you've got two different degrees that Owen's asking about,
yeah.
Intelligence and the Master of cybersecurity?
I think if you, and it's always dangerous talking on behalf of my colleagues, but I think if you want to do a Masters of Intelligence, someone who wants a strictly an intelligence career, but if you did it in combination with the cybersecurity analysis, I think that would give you the ability, to be in a cyber intelligence role, but also have an appreciation for intelligence's role in cybersecurity in other roles. And I think certainly that our approach with the cybersecurity analysis course is to use as much of that intelligence approach as possible. We're certainly not saying we're certainly happy to have non-technical people doing the cybersecurity analysis course. We encourage that, but appreciate will help you understand the technical issues. It's not a non-technical course, it's a technical course, but we're not trying to teach people how to run a piece of technology, but understand the significance of how technology hangs together. Just like if someone was, if you need to understand missile defense, you have to have some understanding how missiles work and their range and what fuel they use and how expensive. So there's in any sort of security work, you need to have a domain expertise, and we have domain expertise in cyber, but we're security people.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. Millis has asked, what are the essential skills or qualifications needed to enter a role in the cybersecurity industry? So essential skills and qualifications needed to enter the cybersecurity industry.
I think that, it's always possible, to come from either from a straight IT degree or from some other area into a cybersecurity role. It's possible, but I think that your best chance would be if you had a specialized cybersecurity degree of some sort. I think it's really important to have any practical experience possible. And that's one thing we do in our program is we give people lots of opportunities. We have an internship we run. You can either do it externally or within our own research areas. We have the PACE programs for undergraduates. We try to make things as practical as possible to allow people to actually get practical skills that they can actually use in the workplace. So, yeah.
Emma's asked another question about the workplace, and are there networking opportunities with employers in the industries during the course? So as people are studying, are there opportunities to meet with employers and network?
Yeah, so basically what we do is we have a lot of guest lecturers come in from various organisations and talk to the students, and obviously students are really interested in opportunities and what's happening in industry, but also we have career expos for students where we have a whole bunch of speakers come just talk about the different roles. That's a departmental thing, so we have someone come from New South Wales Police, someone come from ASD, someone come from all the different sort of federal agencies. So there's lots of opportunities for that sort of thing. Plus, as I say, we have internships where we place people with organisations, and we do find people doing internships that are then ultimately employed by that organisation.
Great, thank you. Thomas has asked an interesting question. Is there any indication of foreign interference in the Australian election? I'm guessing Thomas probably referring to last year's federal election.
Yeah. So obviously, there were breaches of the Australian Parliament and of all the major parties. That information doesn't seem to have been used against anyone. There was also social media, basically the same sort of troll farm activity, essentially directed against the coalition, criticising them for their policies. So. Yeah, this is the new reality. Every election, and if you look, obviously talked about the US election, but you look at the French elections, the German elections, Taiwan had an election recently, and there was a lot of cyber activity. This is part of the new normal in the electoral world, and political parties and parliaments and electoral authorities will need this cyber capability as well. So, organisations again that never thought about cybersecurity now have to think about cybersecurity.
Thank you. Emma's asked a question, is the double master's degree program highly demanded in industry? It seems really appealing given the duration. You mentioned there were 2-year courses. In 2 years, you can study 2 masters.
Yes.
So what would you say in response to Emma's question?
I think it'd equip you. It's probably gives you much broader opportunity in terms of opportunities for roles, because these days, and in terms of intelligence roles, and obviously we've had graduates that have gone to work intelligence, they almost all say they're looking, intelligence agents looking for cyber skills. So recruiting for intelligence jobs, they want people with cyber skills. And likewise, the intelligence skills are going to give you a better opportunity with cyber roles, because they want that more open-minded approach in terms of understanding threats, no matter what you're doing.
Right, thank you. Nasiha has asked a question. Is there practical work in any of the subjects that form part of the master's degree, your master's degree? Any practical work in any of the subjects?
Yeah.
Or any subjects that focus entirely on practical cybersecurity, practical as in ethical hacking, pen testing, etc.
Yeah, so our applied cybersecurity unit does a lot of those activities. So there's a lot of sort of little hands-on activities, but also in our cyber intelligence course, a lot of our practical work around open source intelligence, using the internet. So both those units are quite practical in their approach, whilst some of the other units are more about understanding the current threats, understanding the background, understanding that the framework you need to look at these sort of things in. So there's a good mix in the course. I think most students find it a good mix.
Gabrielle's asked, "Hi Stephen, I was doing an internship in a small firm dealing with phishing attacks, mail spams and ransomware attacks, etc. It seems very interesting to me, and I'm keen to work in some big consulting firms as a cybersecurity specialist.
Yep.
Which degree do you reckon is the best option for me, and why?"
So particularly in consulting, because in consulting, I think a cybersecurity analysis degree is more about providing that consulting help. If you're not looking at a strictly technical role, working in an IT shop, running a firewall or running an IDS, something like our masters is much more appropriate. And we do, the Big Four do hire a lot of people that do our courses. We have interns with them. So consulting is definitely a pathway that we try and prepare people for, and those cybersecurity teams in those consulting organisations are growing, because many organisations are still trying to catch up, and the natural consequence is that they'll get outside help.
Thank you. Another Emma, this is a different Emma, has asked a question. Are there options to study units for Master Cybersecurity Analysis, Master of Intelligence online, or even do night classes?
Yeah, so we run, for internal students, we run all our classes in the evening. So they don't start until 5 as the earliest. Some start later. And we run everything externally as well. So basically you can do it online. So that flexibility is there.
Thank you. Similarly, the first Emma, a different Emma again, is semester 2020. Is that going to be fully online?
The university is still working on that, but yeah, I think a lot of stuff will be online. So we basically, first semester, we have, obviously, after week 3, we moved to online. The campus is opening up, so there is the possibility of certain activities on campus if it's safe. But yeah, I think they're still planning that sort of stuff. I don't want to preempt the Vice Chancellor, but yeah, I think it'll be mostly online, but there'll probably, if the opportunity presents itself, some on-campus activity.
Right, thank you. A couple of interesting questions from Paige and then Emily. I'll ask Paige's question first. What types of internships are available throughout the Master of Cybersecurity Analysis?
Yeah, so the New South Wales Police Computer Crime Unit, the Cybercrime Unit, they have interns. We have interns with some big insurance companies in cyber, ones with some New South Wales regulatory agencies, people like corrective services. So there's quite a range, actually. I mean, it varies each semester. It kind of varies. Fred Smith, who runs the internship program, is regularly talking to various partners about internships. So there's all sorts of opportunities. The other one which we're running now is because we're actually setting up our own cyber intelligence lab, where we'll have internships to that, where we're basically doing open source cyber intelligence work, and students will have an opportunity to be part of that as interns. which is actually run by the academic staff.
I mentioned Emily had a question. Would someone with no IT or technical background struggle with the content in these units?
No, as long as you got an open mind to learning more about technology. I think if you hate technology and you don't want to learn anything about it, that would be hard. But I think there's plenty of opportunity for open-minded people. I had a student recently who had a marketing background, and she was fantastic. She really could apply her thinking to that. I mean, one of the great challenges in cybersecurity is communicating to your customers when you have a problem, understanding the impact of an attack. And she was fantastic at applying that. And they're the sort of skills that people need. It's one thing to know about a problem. It's another thing to be able to communicate it effectively.
Great, thank you. Sonny asked a similar question. Should I be familiar with networking concepts, firewalls, OSI model, etc.?
Yeah.
Answer that question.
It's not a requirement, but if you knew more a lot about networks, it's useful. I mean, it's certainly, like I look at myself and I've had all sorts of different experience, and it's about bringing all those different experiences to it. But I wouldn't say if you don't know about networks, don't bother. I think, but just understand that, you just need to learn some of these concepts. This is a domain, and that's part of the knowledge in the domain you need to learn.
Now, the Macquarie Business School offers a Master of Cyber Governance and Management.
Yep.
And Melissa has asked a question: Is your degree suitable to provide skills for entering private cybersecurity industry, or should she actually study Master of Cyber Governance and Management?
I think, and again, I hate to talk for other faculties, but I think that Masters is more focused on people that want to be in like risk management roles or perhaps senior management roles. They're sort of focusing on where they're not actually dealing with sort of the threat type aspects. I mean, they don't talk about actual threats. They're more talking about how do you put a framework in place, for risk management for an organization, that type of thing. I mean, it depends. I mean, if you want to have what is more of a business role than a cybersecurity role, that's the appropriate degree. I mean, the reality is the reason that course exists because in business, cyber is all part of the risk environment they're in. It's all part of something they need to deal with as an enterprise from a management perspective. But within an organization, you can have cyber specialists, and this is what we're trying to train.
Tiffany's asked a question about the range of degrees that you presented a couple of times during your presentation. You showed all the 5 different masters that are available in the department. Can you very briefly explain the difference between these degrees? Because Tiffany feels that they look fairly similar.
Sure. Can I just use the slide? Is that okay? I'll just go back to the slide.
Yeah.
So if you look at the first one, the security and strategic studies, it's really around, think about geopolitics and strategy, defense policy, that type of thing. That's really where that's focused. Intelligence, which I've talked about a bit, is around the professional intelligence practice. Criminology, it is a discipline all on its own. Criminology, there's obviously criminology theory, applied criminology in terms of how you use it, looking at various how law enforcement operates. So again, it's a very different area. And then counterterrorism is really about understanding radicalization, understanding extremists, understanding countering extremists, understanding the background of global terrorism, what drives terrorism. So to me, they're all I mean, obviously I work in the department, but I find them all quite different, and in fact, in terms of academic departments, you'll rarely find a department with such diversity in terms of the things we teach, but also the backgrounds of the staff. Great,
thank you. We might have time for 1 or 2 more questions. Emma has asked, Master Criminology. Do you have any details about the internship unit in the Master Criminology? What sort of companies and projects you might be involved in?
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk too specifically, but I imagine things like, because they do work. I know they do cyber work with the corrective services, but they also would do it for criminology as well, like projects within corrective services that might be dealing, perhaps probation and parole, people like that. I don't know the specifics, but that's the type of thing I'd imagine those sort of internships would involve.
Great, thank you. So I've got another question from Sunny. What do the technical jobs in the cyberspace look like, and what skills would be useful? Did your job at NAB involve technical skills?
It was a combination. So basically I ran a team that did a range of operational things about responding to cybersecurity incidents, investigating breaches, testing, doing pen testing of our own environment to see where the vulnerabilities were, monitoring threat information so we knew what was happening. I mean, there was lots of technical skills, that we employed, but it was this analytical ability that was key, because basically we were the organisation protecting NAB from cyber threats. So we need to have a very good understanding of who the actors were, why they were doing it, how they operated, the non-cyber aspects of their activity. In terms of the right sort of preparation for roles, I mean, if you're interested in doing a technical role, being an IT person running security devices, then yeah, MIT is definitely what you should be doing. But if you don't strictly want to just be, I mean, I'd suggest our degree is much broader in terms of opportunity. But yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much. And just one final question. We offer a graduate certificate in security studies and criminology within the Department of Security Studies. Is that something which people can do if they're not really too sure what masters they want to get into?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's an opportunity, a small commitment in terms of what you want to study, and often when people, and it's also a pathway if people perhaps don't have the background that will allow people to enrol in to do that, to sort of see if they're actually ready to do a full masters.
Great, thank you very much. Well, at this point, it's almost 2 o'clock, so I'd like to thank you, Stephen, very much for answering all those questions, for giving a very informative and detailed presentation about the degree. We at Macquarie University are very keen to answer any questions that you do have. If you have any questions for Dr. McCombie, or for any questions or about this course or any other courses, please do contact us. You can see details there on the slide in front of you. You can contact us by phone, by email, and you can even book a one-on-one 30-minute consultation. We're really sorry you haven't been able to get through all your questions today. We've had quite a lot of questions, but what we will do, we will respond separately to those who we haven't been able to contact or answer their questions today. We will contact you in the next few days by email if you pre-registered for this webinar. So once again, I'd like to thank Dr. Stephen McCombie for speaking to us today. I hope you, as a result of viewing this, more informed now about the Master of Cybersecurity Analysis. We do hope to see as many of you as possible starting studying with us, hopefully in session 2020, if not, then maybe next year. Thank you very much.